Get started as folks continue to filter in. So again, thank you for being here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Liz Williams, and I lead our Career Academies portfolio here at Greater Twin Cities United Way, along with my colleague Long Ki Vang, who's here as well. We're also joined today by our brilliant team, Jasmine and Dan, who are behind the scenes making the event happen. So thank you to both of them. So as many of you know, bringing people together in community is really a core part of the work that we do in Career Academies. And the purpose of today's Lunch and Learn is to take a deep dive together with thought-provoking speakers and concepts related to career pathways, and to really spark conversations for us as individuals and as a community. So we hope today that you leave this event with a deeper understanding of what Career Academies is and what we do, a greater awareness of how public education and employment systems can create together career pathways that are leading with youth voice. And we hope you leave inspired to lean into challenging conversations toward more equitable outcomes for young people. And next, thank you. So for our time together today, I hope you'll join me with a couple intentions. So the first is a simple one, but can often be the most difficult. But I hope that you'll join me in being present today, as well as leaning into curiosity that comes up for you throughout the session, particularly in moments where you might feel a bit challenged. We hope that you will seek connection between what you're hearing today with your work and in your community. And we hope that you'll join us in committing to keeping this conversation going beyond the hour and 15 minutes that we have together today. So to that end, I hope that you will use the chat box for your comments and questions and thoughts throughout the session today, knowing we have a limited amount of time together. Just note, we are recording the session, which you maybe saw earlier, but know that the intention for recording is so that we can share the brilliant thinking from our presenters today with our community who is not able to make it to the session. And then lastly, I hope that you'll connect with us anytime for questions or materials, or just to chat about what you're hearing today, or to be closer connected to our Career Academies work. And so this is just a quick look at the agenda for today. I'll do a bit of intention setting around what Career Academies is and what we do, and then we'll move into our Changemaker Spotlight, where we'll get to hear from a local partner in our community. And then we'll move to our keynote presenter for the session today. And we'll wrap up with a panel with all of the speakers at the end of the session. And so again, if you have questions or thoughts are coming up for you throughout the session, you can use the chat to hold those. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today and spending your lunch hour with us. At United Way, our vision is a community where all people can thrive, regardless of income, race, or place. And so I hope that for all of you joining us today, that you see some of yourselves and your work in our vision. We know that the only way we can achieve our vision is to unite as change makers and develop solutions that address the challenges that no one of us as individuals or as an individual sector can solve alone. Next slide. And so many of you, you might be familiar with Career Academies, or you might know United Way mostly as a grant maker to nonprofits, which is central and core to our approach, but we also play other roles in community across the 5 areas that you see here. So we sit in kind of a unique position. We get inputs from 211, which is a resource helpline that you might be familiar with, especially those of you who work in schools. But we also work in advocacy, business partnerships, and innovation. And so because of the unique position we sit in, where we're getting inputs from community around the needs and opportunities, we're able to identify these gaps that do perpetuate inequity and fill the gaps by supporting innovative and community-centered solutions. And so these innovation initiatives like Career Academies are time-bound strategies that have the ultimate goal of moving change in our region in a sustainable way. And we do this through listening to community and amplifying what's already working and the solutions that many of you are already moving in your communities. So Career Academies is one of these innovation initiatives, and we seek to unite public education and employment systems so that all students in Minnesota have access to wealth building and purpose-driven careers. And so for us, really core to our work is working with our school partners across Minnesota who are building equity-centered pathways to ensure that students have access to college credit, rigorous and relevant curriculum like career and technical education, and meaningful and supportive work experiences that are all in line with high wage and high demand career fields across our state. And as our initiative moves forward, our work is going to focus on two core strategies here. So the first is we want to see high quality career pathways in every district and every community in Minnesota. And we know that in order to see that and realize that strategy, that the state, local, and district policies that exist have to be aligned to create those career pathways. And so you see here sort of the how we're going to get there and how we organize our work and how we're thinking about the levers that we do have. So a couple examples of things that I'm really excited about that we've moved this year. So in terms of policy and advocacy, we had the opportunity this year to work with the Minnesota Educational Equity Partnership, and they are doing advocacy during the legislative session this year, particularly around ensuring race equity throughout higher education. We're also moving a second round of purpose-driven paychecks, which is a grant opportunity that's focused on providing work experiences for young people. And we'll be really excited in the coming weeks to announce the year 2 cohort of grantees. And then the last thing I'll share that you can expect from us in the coming year is that we are working to develop a set of comprehensive tools and resources so that no matter where you are in your career pathways journey, that you have access to those resources and exemplars and connections to move career pathways work in your own community. And so our hope is really that we continue together to build this movement around career pathways. And so I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker that I think their program and the work that they're doing exemplifies this movement towards statewide career pathways that are centered in equity, in particular for the session today that are centered in student voice. So our speaker today from Minneapolis Public Schools is Alexandra Renken. And Alexandra is a special education and work-based learning teacher who has worked for the last decade in both New York City and Minneapolis. And she is currently the coordinator for an internship program that allows students with special education services to train in different settings, such as hospitals, daycares, and wholesale florists. And so today you'll hear more about how Alexandra started a coffee cart at Henry High School in collaboration with a local coffee shop that has amazing coffee called Get Down Coffee Company, as well as the University of Minnesota. And so as you'll hear today, Alexandra sees so much untapped potential in young people and encourages through her work and her advocacy for employers to also see this excellence in young people. And Alexandra is joined today by some amazing guest speakers who I will let introduce themselves in a minute. So Alexandra, thank you so much for being here today.
So our coffee cart, we started this school year, but we began planning it last year. The University of Minnesota approached our special education staff, and they were interested in starting this coffee cart with us with the hopes that we'd eventually go to an empty coffee shop in their education building and have like a full service coffee shop, but that it would be staffed by students from our program. So we have a few presenters today. I actually don't have everyone on this slide. We have 5 students here. They're gonna just talk briefly about things they enjoy about the cart and things that they would improve. And so just to give you a brief overview of our work-based learning program, it's a citywide program for students receiving special education services. Work-based learning coordinators from all the high schools work together to collaborate and provide this programming. We have internal internships in the community at places like a hospital, childcare, and florist, where students can go to gain some job skills and be supervised by a job coach. There's also a career readiness class that we offer at the high schools where we help students with career planning and preparation and everything from like soft skills to job interviewing skills. And then students also have the opportunity to do independent jobs out in the community where they get paid and earn credit. So I kind of gave you some of this background already, but we started collaborating with the University of Minnesota last year. We also reached out to Get Down Coffee Company, which is down the street from Henry, and it's a really cool coffee shop. And they agreed to work with us on this, and they provide us with discounted coffee. They taught us how to brew the coffee to their standards and how to make the drinks. And then they also are open to having our students apply to work in the coffee shop after they complete the coffee cart. Then we also applied for the purpose-driven paychecks grant through the United Way, which has allowed us to have funding to pay our students, which has been huge. And the whole kind of goal behind this was to combine popular jobs among youth. So a lot of youth, they want to work in like food service or retail or grocery, because those are the jobs where they get the most hours and get the biggest paychecks. But we really want to like help them with wealth building careers and to do jobs that will like help them advance to more higher paying opportunities. So we used Rev Academies Business by Design curriculum, and we adapted it to like meet our coffee shop coffee cart, so that students are learning how to be an entrepreneur while they're also working in a popular job placement for youth. All right, so we are going to start going around and having the students share. So the students are all going to share their name, their role at the coffee cart, something they enjoy about working at the coffee cart, and then something that they would like to see done better or improve. So we'll start just kind of passing the computer around.
Yo, what's up? My name's DJ, and I'm the manager. I'm the top dog, and what's called. And the one thing I can improve, one thing I like about the coffee cart is the customers. I like to make them laugh, and then the one.
I don't know what happened
Yeah.
just there.
We can still see you and hear you, but I think the Alexandra, the presentation is not being shared.
Okay. That's fine for now.
Yeah.
Y'all want me to restart? You want me to say what I said at the end?
You could just finish what you were saying.
Oh, the one thing I don't like about the coffee cart is when people late. That's it.
Thank you.
Bro.
All right. So feel free to move the computer.
I'm trying to get on this thing. Okay. My name is Maggie. One thing I like about coffee maker is working with other people. And one thing I want to be better is to sell more stuff for more people to come and see what we got.
Thank you, Maggie. All right, we'll move on to Maya. You ready?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Maya, and I'm a barista at the coffee cart. And one thing I like about the coffee cart is I like how people come. Like the more we tell people about it, the more people show up, and like the more like we start selling different things, more people start coming up, and they would even walk past the coffee cart and like look at it a little bit, to see if they want something. And then one thing I don't like is sometimes we don't all get along with each other. Like there's rough days, and then there's days where it's just not it. But I think that helps us become a better I don't know how to put it, team, because when we realize our mistakes, we talk it out instead of just making the mistake and showing up to work again, having the same issues. So yeah, you're next.
Thank you, Maya.
Hi, my name is Savion. I'm a barista. The thing I like about coffee cart is I like where is it going. It have ups and downs and stuff, but I like where is it going. I can going bigger and like doing it each year for each kid and stuff like that. And the thing we struggle with the coffee cart, I say uniting. You know, it can be a little issue with uniting, but what we do is it comes with a great old package and a great old thing to sell coffee.
All right, thank you to those students for presenting. So we are trying to make the coffee cart as student-led as possible. So they're the decision makers in this whole process right now. We're working on designing a logo for the coffee cart, and we're gonna print the logo onto some t-shirts with like the Get Down logo on it as well. So the students are helping with the design of that, and then they'll help with printing the shirt. The goal is to move the coffee cart to the University of Minnesota campus. So we might just start with just having the coffee cart there, and then eventually open the fully functional coffee shop. And if we do that, we would open up the program to students from all of the Minneapolis high schools so that students throughout the city could have this experience. And then we also have talked about providing some opportunities at the University of Minnesota for students to take classes or earn like certificates. So all of that is in the works, and thanks to the grant that we were awarded, we've been able to kind of get this going, and we're just trying to keep the momentum going and then opening it up at the University of Minnesota. So
Next speaker is Michaela Leslie-Rule, who is a researcher, storyteller, and cultural strategist. She is an experienced focus group moderator with expertise on conducting discussions on socially sensitive topics, both in person and online. And she's conducted hundreds of interviews and focus groups across the country on topics such as identity formation, education, and career pathways. And for the last 15 years, Michaela has supported communities, nonprofit leaders, and philanthropic institutions to advance racial and gender justice. And she co-created with community members research and narrative change projects in the United States, East and Central Africa. And some of her recent partners include the Global Fund for Women, the Tipping Point Community, Memphis Music Initiative, and the Nike Foundation's Grassroots Girls Initiative. Recently, she co-led Striving to Thriving, a multi-year research project that explores Black, Hispanic, and young people experiencing poverty's attitudes and mindsets related to education and work. And this last year, we had the opportunity to see Michaela speak and share more about her research, and we are thrilled to be able to welcome Michaela into our space today. So thank you so much for being here, and I will pass off to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz. It's always very strange to hear someone say your entire CV. You like send it over and you don't expect them to say the entire thing, but thank you. I feel very honored. Thanks to Twin Cities United Way and Liz and Lunki Vung. Thank you for like making this possible for me to be here today. And thanks to Alexandra and the young people that just spoke. I'm excited to sort of follow you and hopefully have a pretty dynamic conversation afterward for our panel. So as Liz said, I'm a researcher and I'm a cultural strategist. My name is Michaela. I do some work with a group called Wonder Strategies for Good. They're a communications and audience research firm that looks at socially sensitive issues. I also do some research with a group called Goodwin Simon Strategic Research, which is also a public opinion firm and is the organization with which I led the Striving to Thriving work. So Liz said a lot of what I was actually going to say right at the top. I'll tell you that I'm a story geek, so I really love stories. And I feel really fortunate that I've been able to sort of find my own pathway to doing this work that allows me to do both research and also just geek out on stories and listen to young people. So I want you to hold in your minds some of what Alexandra said and the young people that just spoke before, and just hold in your minds for this presentation kind of the importance of hearing from young people and giving young people voice and what it really means to center young people. So hopefully, much smarter than I am, once said that the quality of our solutions depends upon how richly we draw the problem, right? So the question that I'm offering for today is, what does it look like to draw that problem more richly, right? I want to share some of what my colleagues and I learned from young people in our research, and in particular, thinking about how they envision their future lives, and in particular, how they experience and how they want to experience the journey toward career and career and formation of occupational identities. So I said this word, occupational identities, and our pathway space is full of jargon, and occupational identity is one of those words of jargon. So I thought I might just start by saying how are we are defining this word, right? Occupational identity formation is a nascent field, but I'm using this definition that was I'm kind of borrowing it from Mimi Ito and Jessica Callahan, who come from the Connected Learning Lab, and sort of refining it as we go, as we start to better understand young people's own perceptions of this path. So the first is that it's around how young people envision their future selves in the workforce. It's what they like to do and what they believe they're skilled at, and also where they believe that they belong. So it feels like many, many years ago, because COVID is like this, this rock in between when we did the research and where we are now. But in 2017 and 2018, the Gates Foundation, their Pathways team was really interested in better understanding young people's own experiences of occupational identity formation, because they saw that there was a gap, right? There was kind of a missing piece, where a lot of the work that's happening in our career pathway space, many of us who are on this call today, we're relying on kind of outcomes data, which is, statistics, right? It's like, if this happens, then this is likely to happen, right? The number of young people who graduate from high school, the number of young people who enroll in post-secondary education or a 4-year degree, right? But something is being overlooked in that conversation. We're relying a lot on what adults are saying, not only what adults are saying is important, but we're also relying on adults' sort of perception of what that trajectory should look like. So to sort of start out with, this research was intended to really have a deeper understanding of young people's own mindsets around both career exploration, career preparation, around education, right? Around what the pathway could and should look like, and also with their own lived experiences of developing into this person that ultimately will be a worker, right? A working person. So the research is focused on 15 to 21-year-olds. We were interested specifically in Black and Hispanic young people of all incomes, and then white young people who come from lower income households. We also spoke with parents and adult influencers, also parents of young people in the same age group, and also with the similar racial and ethnic identities. And then we talked to adult influencers. So those were like coaches and, who also mentors, people who are working to support young people in some capacity and sort of have their own vantage point on kind of an adult, caring adult that's not a parent. We did a mix of, quantitative and qualitative research. We did in-depth interviews. We did focus groups across the country. We did something called asynchronous focus groups, which is kind of like a 4-day conversation that happens online where young people log in and out of a platform and answer questions, and then the moderator, sometimes me, sometimes others, sort of answer those questions and engage with them and ask them to do sort of activities. And then we did an online national survey. And the survey in the first instance was conducted in 2019, and there were about 2,600 young people who were included in that survey. And then in 2020, right in the I think the middle of 2020, we started doing some other surveys with young people, because obviously what was happening, we thought, oh my goodness, things are changing so dramatically, right? The context has shifted. And we did 4 surveys through 2020 and early 2021 with 3,000 additional young people. So what did we learn? And I want to sort of caveat this. We're going to jump in now to sort of what I think is important about me being here today, is talking about what we learned. But I also think it's important for you to know that I'm really going to spend more time talking about how do we activate this work. So when Liz reached out to me, she said, you probably want to give people kind of an overview of what you learned and then go deep on some certain things. So if you feel like this feels like an overview, it is. And then I'm going to go deep on some other aspects, but I really welcome your questions either, via email. You'll have my LinkedIn profile if you want to learn more about this slide in particular. So one thing I can say is that we started out actually not with 5 core concepts, but instead we started out with 8 key insights. And those key insights just felt at a certain point too far away from young people's own actual voices. Like they were sounding like researchers that were saying, they start, we observed that this happened, right? And it was feeling very antithetical in some ways to our desire to really center young people's voices, in particular, as we start to disseminate this research. So instead, we came up with these 5 core concepts. The first one is that I can change my life, right? So this is about agency. And what we have observed is that young people really feel a great deal of agency in their own lives and largely are optimistic about their futures, right? They see themselves as capable and resourceful. They feel like they're the biggest change maker in their lives. So this can be really positive. I'm ready to make choices. I feel equipped to make those choices. And it can also feel more negative, where people feel like, even if I don't have the resources or information that I think I need, it's all up to me, right? Like I am the single thing that is going to determine my future success. The second is that my identity will help me to succeed, right? So what we heard was that within a kind of personal, familial, and community context, young people really believe that their personal identities are an asset, right? And that they will be beneficial to them and to their success in life. And most young people, as I said before, really aim to thrive, right? And this is deeply informed by their identities and their sense of self. So although they anticipate experiencing some of the discrimination and the bias that adults often hold up and say, wait a minute, this will also happen in your life, many young people, they anticipate that they're going to overcome that, right? That they can overcome it by being and doing better, which comes back to this idea of being a change maker, right? It's not the system that's going to change necessarily, right? But instead it's that I can do it and I have to do it, right? We also kind of, to that point, I think it was a little bit of a conflict and a tension for some of the advisors and researchers who really wanted people to say there's this systemic problem, right? We really want you to feel like you can address the systemic problem, but ultimately, for many young people, that systemic change felt out of reach. The third, I want to have a good life and a good job is key. So what we heard is that many young people are motivated by having a good life. And when we were prepping for this session, Alexandra was telling me a little bit about the coffee cart idea. And she was talking about the need to meet young people where they are at. Like, people want to earn money, right? So this is a really cool project that helps people to earn money, in addition to all of the other sort of outcomes, right, and experiences that are happening, like learning to work as a team, right? We heard people say it's hard to work as a team, right? It's this trying on that's happening. And at the same time, is meeting really a core need that some young people have expressed. So we heard that many young people are not tethered to a specific position or a type of career that they'll do with adults. So often we ask little kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Sometimes that question persists into like people being teenagers. But what we heard is that young people are really curious about how they want to live. So maybe the question is not, what do you want to be? But actually it's, how do you want to live? What do you want your life to be like? And then last, I'm already on a pathway to my future. And excuse me, I think I skipped something. Yes, so the fourth one, sorry, is around support, right? Knowing that you might need support. So the thing that feels important here is that we have all succeeded. Anyone who is in this space, who talks about social capital, who talks about the need to have caring adults in your life, young people got the message about that, right? We heard that easily reflected back, the importance of networks, the importance of knowing people, the importance of having mentors, of experiencing internships. But what we also heard is that they're not sure how to initiate those relationships, right? They know they need them, but it's scary to not know how to get them, right? And that sort of reinforces this idea that they maybe don't have enough or don't feel equipped. So there's definitely more work that we all can do to figure out, okay, we got the message, right? We want the relationships, but how do we supply and support those relationships? How do we help them to happen? The last thing, which I said earlier was the last, but really this is the last, is that I'm already on a pathway to my future, right? Many young people, I see someone nodding their head, great. Many young people, right, they're already making choices and they are informed choices. And I think often as adults, we have this habit of saying that the decisions that young people are making are not informed, right? But they are informed. Right? They're informed by their identity, by their life experiences, by their emotions, by their beliefs, by their environment, right? And what they've been exposed to. So I'll say that some people, some sort of young people see themselves as at the start of a longer journey, right? Some see themselves as just about to take that first step, and others may see themselves at the midpoint, but they most believe that they are already deeply engaged in making choices that will lead them to their future lives. So, overview. So I said, I'm curious about activation, right? And that's what made me excited about coming here today and talking about this research. So this question, how do we activate our findings in service of your work and our work and the work that we're doing in the pathway space? Like, what do we do with this research, right? My colleagues and I started to think about what we were learning and the stories that young people were telling us. And really, I work in stories. I told you, right? I think Liz said I'm a storyteller. I told you I geek out on stories. And I started to feel really uncomfortable with how the stories that young people were telling us in the research were running counter in some ways to the stories and the narratives that our broader society and our field often hold about young people, right? And you say, well, what do you mean by that, Michaela, right? One of the most enduring narratives about Black and Brown young people in particular is that they're in crisis and that they need to be rescued, right? Portfolios, foundations create portfolios designed to, rescue, right, Black and Brown young people, right, and young people that are experiencing poverty or from lower income backgrounds, right? There's a frame around the experience, right, that is like there's like this condition of being in deficit, right? And so I think we need to think about that and how these types of narratives inform our work, right? It's easy to say that, oh no, that's not the way that I approach my work, but I think it's important for us to understand kind of the narrative landscape, right? That's informing the work that we do, right? And I'm going to put a finer point on this, just, and I feel free to push back. I can't see the chat, so I'm going to ask folks to lift that up for me if people are like, no, you're wrong, come off of mute and let me know. But when I think about it, I think about COVID a lot, and I think about the media coverage of learning loss related to COVID. And I think about how numbers are used, right? And I think about how often we're talking about learning loss and how it is connected to racial disparities, right, around achievement. Those disparities existed before COVID, right? And before COVID, we were talking about a different source, a different thing. That was the main reason, right? But if you look back, you can go to the 80s, you can go before that. There has been a perpetual conversation about something that is informing this crisis, right? And what we heard in conversations with young people, and this is not to say that everything I just said does not exist. That is not the point of this, like me saying this, right? What's important is to understand that young people themselves are not necessarily experiencing their lives as being in crisis. They're not experiencing their communities as being in crisis, right? So we tend to have a dynamic where we as adults, we know better, right? And our information is somehow more valuable because of our age, because of like our experience, right? And what I would ask us to do is to consider what happens when young people's experiences actually are contradicting the dominant narratives that we have, okay? Because, right, this misalignment can cause harm, right? It colors our interventions by we start creating interventions that are framed around deficit, right? It overlooks young people's experiences, their expertise, almost entirely, basically relegating silent, the actual people that are supposed to be the beneficiaries of all of our work, right? And then it does something else, which is there's these researchers called Desi and Ryan, and they study motivation theory. And they say that if you are designing in a way that isn't based on my experience, right, but instead based on your projection of what my experience is, your narrative of my experience, that I will see that that's not for me, right? And we talk a lot about uptake and, how do we message and how do we ensure that what we are building is actually right for the young people that we want to work with, right, that we want to impact, right? So there is this question, right, if I don't feel like something is for me, right, what I instead am understanding is that it's for someone else's idea of me, right? And that threatens this core thing, which is around my agency, my ability to control my own life, which, as I said earlier, right, is core to this work, right? So how much power does narrative actually have? I'm going to ask you to do a little thing and enter some stuff in the chat, right? Take a moment and look at this image, right? What do you see? What do you see? You just type in the chat, like everything is a right answer. That's what I start focus groups with. The Dipper, the Big Dipper. Stars, stars, right? So yeah, it's the Big Dipper, right? Infinity of beauty, right? Okay, it's the Big Dipper. It also could be the North Star, right? That top left. Cultural, historical context informs what we see in the night sky. It's like the most natural. When you look up at the sky, what do you see, right? What you see is informed by your narratives, right? So our narratives, these underlying belief systems that inform how we see the world, also inform who has power, who doesn't, what's right, what's wrong, right? What can be changed in the world, right? And what just is, right? Right? So I want to come back to this idea, right? How do we activate the findings and service of our own work, right? And my answer for today is that we complicate the narrative, right? We inject young people's voices into our narratives, and in particular in the career pathway space, right? Right, and when we do that, when we do those things, we can be maybe more assured that what we're building is actually in service of the young people that we're hoping to benefit, to serve, to impact, to influence, right? So I want to ask you to just consider 3 big ideas, and this is where we come into activation, right? These are hopefully the three big ideas, and we'll see. You know, I'll do what I can. We'll get through them, and then if we don't, then you can ask me questions later. So one is an orientation towards thriving, right? I said that earlier. Sometimes we think that young people need to be taught to thrive. That's not what we found in the research. We found that young people are, by and large, most of the young people in our research have an orientation towards thriving. And so we have this idea of how young people think about work, right? And it's this metaphor that it's surviving, striving, and thriving, right? And this is the way that we are kind of articulating the emotional connections that young people associate with these different phases of their education and work pathways. So this is how young people think about desirable life outcomes and sort of the occupational pathways to getting there. So on one side of this, you have this idea of thriving, right? And when young people feel that they're thriving, they feel they've achieved their goals, they've attained their personal goals, right? They may love their careers, or they may find some satisfaction or feel fulfilled. They feel fulfilled in some way, but ultimately they feel like they are living their best self, right? And it's kind of their personal version of what a good life is. We found that they're really describing thriving and a good life in similar terms. They talk about having control over their time and their resources. They talk about ownership of a business, of a home, the ability to travel, right? They talk about not having debt, giving back in some cases, and the ability to retire. On the other side, right, is surviving, right? And surviving looks more like living paycheck to paycheck, working to make ends meet, or potentially not having a job at all. And then you can see that there's other ways they're describing that experience, often around renting, not owning, in contrast to ownership. And in some cases, in parts of the country, having a lower quality home. So having a brick house, a brick home in some cases, was like critically important to kids that are living in places where they're living in double wides or other types of housing. So there's a lot that happens between surviving and thriving, right? And that's striving. And interestingly, these are a lot of, except for the last one, these are a lot of emotional kind of understanding of what striving is, right? It's perseverance, it's struggle, it's having patience, it's overcoming obstacles. But it's really, really hard for young people to talk about what exactly you do when you're striving. Like, what are the activities, right? Whereas they're super clear about what the activities could be for thriving and also for surviving. It's more difficult for them to articulate what the activities are for striving, although most of them believe that you have to strive in order to thrive. So what's the second big idea? The second big idea, I said before, I'm learning as a communications person, right? You say it again, you say it again, you say it again. So the second big idea is that young people are already making choices about their educational pathways and careers, right? I said earlier, and I'm saying this constantly because I want you to leave with this, right? They are oriented towards thriving, right? So the differences actually that we observed are actually in how equipped they feel, right, to set those goals, and how confident they feel that they can find the information, the resources, the people to, to make steps towards those goals, right? So we noticed patterns as we were doing this exercise. We did an exercise where we asked young people to fill out a pathway that kind of told us, where they could say, these are the steps and stages that I think I'll have to pass through in order to reach my goals, right? And what we noticed was that there were some patterns that we think about as being 5 occupational pathways, or 5 categories of occupational pathways. And I think what's important here is not necessarily, I'm not urging you to employ this kind of way of categorizing. It's more for us to understand that there are variations in confidence levels, right? And variations in how they conceptualize the future, right? So coming back to what Alexandra was sharing earlier, this thing about meeting people where they are is critically important, right? So this is kind of I think about this as kind of a tool for us to understand how do we figure out where folks are. So I wanted to share some of these pathway images, and I know they're handwritten, right? So it can be challenging to see. But I want to tell you about this guy that I met in a focus group in New York, right? And in his pathway, he says that he wants to run his own gaming team. He wants to be a gamer, right? And at first, we as adults, right, we're looking at this and we think, oh, he wants to be a gamer. Lots of kids want to, be YouTube stars, or want to, earn money through TikTok, right? Like we hear this often. And when we looked at his idea of what his pathway looked like, we were really struck by the choices that he's already made first to surround himself in a context in which he's learning this thing that he cares a lot about, right? So he's already working at GameStop, which is a store that sells games, right? And also had a very bad story recently in the news, but this was before that, right? He works at GameStop. He is becoming a manager. He has this information about, he's informed, right? He knows that by the time he turns 21, he needs to be scouted by one of the teams that he respects, because he explains to us that brain science tells you that after 21, you don't learn games as quickly as you do before, right? So he knows he's on this timeline, right? So this is his plan A. He talks about that his entire pathway could take 20 years. He's at GameStop in the beginning, at the top, and at the bottom is owning his own team, right? He has this acknowledgement that other things could happen or get in the way, right? But he's really, really confident about the relationships that he needs, and the types of steps and stages he might need to pass through. So here's another one. This is a young woman in Chicago who wants to be a nurse. She wants to be a traveling nurse, and along her pathway to becoming an international travel nurse on the bottom, she wants to also open dance studios. She wants to use the money from being a nurse to open dance studios and create this thriving sort of business. And some of these steps feel like really she's done a lot of research around. She knows that she hasn't gone to college yet. She knows that she's going to need to go to college, and she's trying to figure out what the stepping stone might be to go from where she is now to get into an LPN program and ultimately into an RN program. She says, I'm already getting it. I'm networking, I'm meeting, I'm bumping elbows with the right people. You feel me? I make great rapport with people. I think everything in life is about being able to know how to talk to people. You tell them what you're trying to do, and you could probably end up with something, right? She's very confident. Yeah. And she's also demonstrating this thing about relationships that I mentioned earlier, right? She is prioritizing relationships as part of her path. Here's another one. This is a young man who wants to go into the military, and he has already done an internship. He's already doing his internship around engineering and learning something about computer science. And his idea is that he's going to do this thing, and it's going to make him have an edge, right, to be able to join the military. He also got these feedback loops in here, right? He's like, this might work out, but then if it doesn't, then I need to go back a step, right? Ultimately, he has a clear sense that the military will end at some point, and then he's going to have to find another second career, right? So he is anticipating that he's going to do 2 careers, right? And this is kind of contrary to a lot of our messaging about what it looks like to go on a career pathway. Interestingly, he talks about retiring from the military. The timeline might be a little bit, a little confusing, but ultimately, this is a kid who he has a clear sense of what he wants to do. Something important I want to pull out here, and I'll pull it out when I get to the next slide. And then this is another category, and this is a kind of a young person who maybe knows what they want to do, but it's just not clear. Like it's clear that they don't have quite enough information to fill in the steps and stages, right? So here you can see that on the left, she's actually starting off the pathway. She talks about wanting to be a detective or a forensic scientist at the end of the pathway. And her pathway to go in there includes doing sheriff's training, which takes 6 months in the state that she's in, and then becoming a sheriff. Something that I want to call out here is this piece. We talked about young people feeling like they're the biggest change maker in their lives. You can see this here as my challenge will probably be wanting to quit, right? She feels both that she needs to have the agency to do this thing, to follow her pathway. And she also is very clear that for her, the thing that could most stand in her way is herself. So number 3, we're almost there. Number 3, the third thing I want you all to sort of remember, the thing that I remember when I think about complicating the narrative, is that young people value exploration, right? And we tend to present a linear visual, a linear idea, right, of what it looks like to choose what you want to do with your life, right? The idea of a career pathway is a progression that we often talk about as linear. What we found is that young people really want to be able to try things on. And that's the language that they use and what we started to use is like trying things on, right? Exploring things in low stakes, low risk settings, right? What we heard in particular from young people that come from lower income families and young people that may be the first generation to graduate from high school or to go to college was that they were feeling a lot of pressure to make the right decision and feeling that it was premature, that they just did not have enough information to make a decision about the rest of their lives at 17 or 18, right? And so this is really an effort for us. We started thinking about how are they actually experiencing occupational identity formation and how do they want to experience it, right? This is kind of what we think might be like less about the linear nature of it and more about the iterative nature of it, right? There are 3 distinct stages. There's exposure, there's exploration, and there's selection. And the idea is that exposure is largely concerned with what you learn at home. This is how they talk about it. What you were exposed to is the jobs that your family members had or those that you saw in your community. And importantly, the way those people talk about those jobs, right? When your mom comes home and says, I'm a nurse, okay, but when your mom comes home every day and says, my feet really hurt and this happened at work, or I don't have the amount of power that I want to have in terms of making decisions, like, right? That is part of what folks are absorbing, young people are absorbing. Like, what does it feel like? Again, what is it like to live this experience of X job? Exploration is, in the kind of theoretical framing that some researchers use, exploration and experimentation are different, but largely for young people, those are the same thing. They are connected. So there isn't necessarily this need to distinguish that when we think about how we're talking about this phase. And this is the trying things out. It's trying on different aspects of career and work. And again, in that low risk setting where you're still able to adjust. And then selection is about determining those first steps of your chosen career pathway. And one thing I want you to think about, I mentioned that this was iterative and it's compounding, but I also want you to think about how each of these steps reflects a different level of agency, right? They are growing and increasing in their agency as they move through this framework, right? And that is, in the very beginning, one of the first things I said is that agency is critically important, right? And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll show you, is at each of these stages, and mostly at exposure, right, but exploration to some degree, they're accepting, rejecting, or modifying what they're learning, right, in service of refining whatever they're going to do next. So I can ask you all to read this, or I can read it. But maybe someone can come off of mute and just read what's in bold here. Please.
I can come off mute and read, like Michaela.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Lucas.
Just the bold.
Okay. There's probably like one person in my family that's like, I guess you could say living good or like happy with their job. They're not happy. It just changes my whole perspective about life and what I want for myself. Nobody is doing what they're supposed to do. Nobody sees. I don't know. People see life as like this, I guess, like work. Like a lot of people in my family, they have their degrees, but they're not working in their field. They tell me they're not happy. I see it on their face.
Thank you. So this is one type of exposure, right? This is a young person who's talking about exposure. They're talking about what their parents do, what their education was, and how they have interpreted their experience based on living in this family, right? And in this case, when we talked about like accept, reject, or modify, in this case, this young person says later in the focus group, they're rejecting this and they're going on their own path, right? And so they're moving into exploration. I'm going to skip over this one for time, but this is exactly the same. The kid with the pathway with the military, his exposure was an acceptance, right? My dad's in the Army, my mom's in the Navy, my grandpa's in the Navy. It's just our family thing, right? This is a great job and I'm going to do it too, right? This is a continuation of that young person who talked about what he was seeing at home. That first one that one of the participants really nicely read, right? And here he says, I'm more conscious and aware than ever this year specifically, and like what I really want to do if I'm passionate about, right? He talks about, I'm trying to find places to network, to build, I'm adding my skills to my natural abilities, right? He sees exploration as being very relational, which is like building relationships, figuring it out, right? But also really emotional. Exploration. Can someone come off of mute and read this one? We're almost there. Exploration.
Last summer, I did an internship. For the longest time, I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. Then I did an internship and found out that it's incredibly boring.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I also did like drafting, so computer software design. So I decided to switch more to like computers and stuff.
Yeah, so look, like exploration can also be, we talked about occupational identity. Exploration is also in service of figuring out what you don't like, right? What you don't like so that you can make better choices, right? I think my grandparents used to say, like, when you know more, you do, what is it? Know better, do better, right? It's kind of that idea, right? You know more about yourself, you make decisions that better reflect what you're interested in. And thank you to the person who read. And then here, I just want to lift up that we don't see selection a lot in 15 to 21-year-olds, right? They talk about what they'd like the process to be, but they don't necessarily, they're not able to necessarily say what it looks like from their own lived experience because many of them haven't made this selection yet. This is from a group in New York. We did some comparison groups with 26 to 29-year-olds who had grown up in what they self-reported, grown up in families with lower income backgrounds, and who now felt that they were middle income. And this, I'm going to go through it quickly, but she talks about this young adult, right? Talks about all of these different things that they tried out before finding the thing that was the right career for them. And so when I think about that iterative compounding framework, it's this, right? What would it look like if we were really intentional and clear that it is actually iterative, that we are working in service of young people having choices, as many choices, right? As highest quality choices as possible for as long as possible, so, right? And so we're helping them to build the skills and the confidence and feel equipped to make those choices, you know, I want to say in perpetuity, but you know what I mean. So this is the end of my presentation. I am really grateful for your attention, and I'm looking forward to chatting about it. I have a bunch of activities that come from a toolkit that we created out of this research. And here are two of them, and I'm lifting these up in particular. This is mapping young people's pathways, which is sort of some guidance to think about how you might create those pathways with young people and what it looks like to facilitate a conversation around pathways. And the other one is the 5 occupational pathways, the 5 occupational pathways framework, which is really trying to, how might we use that in service of assessment, for example, or in service of program design. So that's it. There's a bunch of resources. I will drop them in the chat. And I think that's all. I have takeaways, but I think that's all I have to say. I'm conscious of the time.
Michaela, thank you. So we'll move into our panel. So if you, for students, and Alexandra, if you want to come, make sure you're on camera so we can see you. And for those who have questions about either what Alexandra presented for the students or that incredible body of work that we just heard from Michaela, if you have questions or thoughts, feel free to use the chat. You can also come off mute. And I will kick us off with a couple questions. So just get your brain thinking. We have this space for questions for you all, so go ahead and enter them into the chat as we get going today. So my first question is going to be for our students and our young people. I will say it is like a really wonderful experience as someone who is often talking about young people, to have young people in the actual space as we're having these conversations, and it shifts even how I'm listening and in taking in information. One of the ideas that came up a couple times was this idea of meeting young people where they're at in terms of the opportunities that they're taking. And so I guess in sort of the idea there, and the question I have for our students is, as you are thinking about opportunities that you get involved in, so whether it's a job outside of school or this internship opportunity with Get Down Coffee through your school, like what is drawing you to different opportunities? We mentioned pay as one, but I can imagine that's not the only thing. And so I'm curious how you all, like what brings you to different opportunities in your community?
What did they say?
What draws you to different opportunities like the coffee cart, or it could be Agape, the childcare site? DJ, did you have an answer? Business? Like learning about business?
Like what draws us to the coffee cart?
Yeah. To work with different people.
Work with different people?
Listen, name.
What draws you to like the coffee cart or
Like
even
Agape.
Agape childcare?
What's that?
To learn how to work with kids more.
To learn how to work.
Agape.
Yeah.
So Maggie does an internship through our program also, where she works at a daycare.
Me too.
And so does Kyla. And Maya works at a florist. So, all right.
So we heard like working the interest, so like what it was, right? Working with children, it sounded like, or like alignment to your interests. I'm curious, Michaela, you introduced some frameworks toward the end, and I'm curious if Alexandra or Michaela could share, as we think about all that's been shared today and the different perspectives young people are giving us, do you have examples of what that looks like in action to really honor and think about what we're hearing directly from young people? Do you have good examples of what that looks like? I know, Alexandra, like your program is a great example of that, but I'm curious if you both could share a couple things that you've seen that you would lift up for this group.
Alexandra, do you want to? I'll jump in and then you follow up. So I want to preface this by saying that I don't usually do programmatic work. So I do a lot of things around how we talk about different issues, a lot of things around communications and strategy, but also research. So one of the things that we have done, you saw in the slides, we branded this in a way, like from a communications perspective, we branded this work in a way that feels informed and rooted in what young people told us, right? So the images that you saw here the graphic design, et cetera, came from conversations with young people. And in many cases, young people created the graphics, they took the pictures, they created the illustrations. And we use that throughout the Equitable Futures website, which is owned by the Gates Foundation. So that's significant. In future research projects that we've done, I have one other thing to mention. We have a quote library, a searchable quote library with thousands of quotes from across the country related to this research that people can go in and sort of do a deeper dive on, so that the experience is not that we just cherry pick specific quotes, right? So you have a bigger sense of the data. And the last thing I'll say is that we are now working with Build. Build, which is an organization that focuses on youth entrepreneurship. And we have a youth advisory panel, and they are engaged on many of our projects that are specific both to young people's experience and those that are not, right? So they're informing the research design, doing analysis with us, and creating content.
Okay, so I can answer this as well. So, I mean, something we try to do is have student voice represented as much as possible, and student interest. And I think most of us know that like the job that you want to have when you're in high school may change 50 times before you land on your future career. So we try to have variety of options as well to kind of give students exposure. With our internship sites, like I said, we have like ones that are popular career options such as hospital, the daycare. A lot of students want to work with youth. So we try to represent like what students are interested in and give them a variety of options and encourage them to try out different things, not to just like settle on one option and just stick with that. And then with things like the coffee cart, we just try and make the students the decision makers in how things go and how things are run there. So that's another way we try and just kind of represent their interests. And yeah, it's just like about getting as much exposure and as much experience as possible, because that's like, I feel like at this age, they're just really exploring what they're good at and what they like doing and what is also like a viable career for the future. Like some jobs that they want to do might not exist in 10 years. So it's like also what is a practical job for them to go into.
Thanks, Alexandra. I'm connecting to earlier, Michaela, in your presentation, the idea of like understanding our own natural abilities or what your sort of inclinations are, and then using your experiences to build on that, right? Like I'm not starting from zero. My next question is for the students again. So I'm really curious what you all want to keep learning about or want to keep exploring over the next couple of years.
Okay, I'm gonna go off mute because we have some students who want to answer.
Go to cop.
Okay, we're off mute, so remember that.
Go to college and be a hairstylist or a dancer. One of those.
Hell yeah.
Hairstyle.
I want to do whatever I want. Something like that.
Do whatever you want. All right. DJ, you don't have.
I know what I want to do.
All right, we're off mute, you guys. Everyone can hear you. Okay, do you have an answer, Maya?
Sorry.
Do you want to wait or
No,
are you ready?
I want to be like I want to be a counselor, because I have siblings that like have a lot of like issues with like their development, and they have like a lot of like inner issues, and because like my mom wasn't the best mother to them, so I want to work with kids who like can't communicate properly, or like little kids, like a social worker.
Yeah, you would be amazing at that, Maya. All right, excuse us for being a little hyper. We're not used to like sitting and doing adult-like meetings like this, but I think Maggie had something else.
Yeah, I think college is the best spot in Mankato.
Mankato?
Mankato for college. That's a good spot.
It's a good school, yeah.
I want to be an artist too.
Artist too?
Yeah.
All right, I think everyone had a chance to answer that question. So thank you for dealing with our hyperness.
No, it's good energy. There's great energy. I think a next question, maybe a follow-up that was in the chat is for the young people again, is what's something you would like those who do our work? So like if you think about adults in the room who design programs for young people, what would you like the adults to know?
What would you like the adults to know for like adults who
It
design programming for
It
you?
depends what it is, like what type, like.
Like work programming.
Oh, like first.
Mhm.
I agree.
What do you want adults to know?
That
No.
they should make more links and like put them.
Learn more about you,
Right.
what's your best spot you like to work at, what's safe for you.
That's a great answer.
I feel like they should learn more about the person who's coming in and how they communicate and how they work things out.
That's a great answer. Any other input?
Because some people will walk into jobs and not tell them, not advocate for themselves or not stand up for themselves. And I don't feel like that's right. So.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great answer. I'm going to close us out with just a few minutes left, but I do want to give everyone the chance to answer one final question. I would love if everyone could just share what you are most hopeful or excited about for the future as people who get to work with young people, or Michaela, like do put a ton of attention and research on young people's voices. What is giving you hope for the future?
I think that that there's more opportunities like this one where there's intentionality around young people being in the conversation, and they're brilliant. Like they are brilliant. Yeah.
Thanks, Michaela. Alexandra, and the students can also answer that question too. We'd love to hear from them.
So I would say I'm excited to see the new jobs that will exist in the future, because we know there will be a lot of new jobs invented, and then also the creative solutions youth come up with to deal with like the problems, because they're inheriting like a pretty difficult world to live in with lots of issues, like the environment being one of them. So I really am excited to see how they think differently, because they're going to have new ideas that haven't existed yet and new solutions, and I'm excited for all of that.
Thanks, Alexandra. Did any of the, I don't know if they could hear us, but did any of the young people want to respond in the last minute? They gave us some good things that they're looking forward to already, but.
Mute.
Yeah,
Anything else?
that'd be it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you to all of our presenters and the students for being here. We so appreciate it. I took a ton away from the session, and I hope everyone who was able to make it today did as well. We are going to close out, and so we have just a couple quick announcements to wrap us up for the day. One body of work that I'm very excited about is that we are going to start a Career Academies newsletter. So for many of you who get emails or resources, we're going to try to consolidate all of that, resources, funding opportunities, events that are aligned to the work that we do in a newsletter. So keep an eye out for that. And then also there is an event that if you're able to go, we would highly recommend attending. It's called Tiger Path. And so it is a deep dive at Hutchinson High School into workforce solutions, and you would also get the opportunity to tour the career pathways that are at Hutchinson. And so I highly encourage you, if you can go, to attend. We will follow up to this event with more information about how to register for that and how to get involved. And then lastly, if you would take just a minute before you head out today to take our survey, we use this information to design our future sessions. And so if you have a moment, please take that. We really do look at the responses and use them. But that is it for today. Thank you everyone again for being here today, for spending your lunch hour with us. And we hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.